Welcome to The Monster Report, a show highlighting those entertaining creatures of film history. Nick Adam Poling, your host, and today it's time to take on in our Universal lineup 1931's Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff. Where do you even begin with this film? There's so much to say and so little time, so let's get started. This is the rare monster story that was written by a female author. Mary Shelley published The Modern Prometheus, or Frankenstein, in 1818. There's a lot to read on her life and other writings, but this review will focus solely on the 1931 film, directed by James Whale and starring Colin Clive and Boris Karloff. Believe it or not, this isn't the first time a film version of Frankenstein was attempted. A 16-minute silent version was produced by Thomas Edison Studios in 1910. It's in the public domain and very accessible online. Check it out. The Universal version is the one everyone remembers, though. Try and think of the name Frankenstein without picturing Boris Karloff's iconic image in your head. You think of his face with the sunken-in eyes, the indentation on his cheek where Karloff removed his dental plate, the green color to make him look pale in black and white film. You can thank the great Jack Pierce again for the makeup effects. This is probably his best-known work. He gave him an exaggerated brow and flat head. The eyelids were added in order to give him that dead look. Shading and grease paint gave his skin a pale complexion. The makeup didn't shadow Karloff's performance by covering his facial expressions, though. Painstaking detail was taken to allow the monster to convey emotions and communicate without using words. Over 3 hours of torturous makeup and costuming made Karloff's job in the movie very grueling, but memorable nonetheless. Colin Clive played Henry Frankenstein. Yes, of course, the scientist's name is Frankenstein, not the monster. He plays a character that starts out as a mad scientist, bringing to life dead flesh, but ends up regretting his actions and leads the march to capture his creation. Clive plays the role very melodramatically, but the character needs to be that way to a point. Along with his heavy theatrics, Clive has scenes that show his character is highly intelligent and passionate.
Where should we be if nobody tried to find out what lies beyond? You never wanted to look beyond the clouds and the stars, or to know what causes the trees to bud, and what changes the darkness into light?
Sadly, the actor did not live that long, and succumbed to tuberculosis. He struggled with alcoholism, and that inner conflict may have come through in his performance in both this film and its sequel, Bride of Frankenstein. At one point, Bela Lugosi was originally going to play the monster. He turned it down after deciding that it wasn't a good role for his career. There's some test footage shot of Lugosi wearing the makeup that made him look more like the Golem, a creature from German expressionist films. I wish I could see the footage if it ever surfaces. James Whale accepted the role of director. He was primarily a stage director before taking on Frankenstein. He put his personal touch on the script and production of this monster film. Whale's style made the audience sympathize with the monster. Thinking back to this film, you realize that the monster is constantly being tormented by torches, being locked up, drugged, and hunted down. He didn't choose to be brought to life by a scientist playing God. Largely, he's an innocent creature, guilty by circumstance. Interestingly, Whale wasn't interested in directing the sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, but when he was given complete creative control, it made the offer hard to resist. Now to the monster. Boris Karloff had performed in several films before Frankenstein. He could have easily turned down this role, or phoned in the performance. Karloff took this role very seriously, and put his body through a rigorous physical performance. His makeup took hours to apply. His costuming weighed nearly 50 pounds. He fights with other characters and even had to carry Colin Clive up the stairs of the windmill. Karloff was 41 years old at this time. Edward Van Sloan plays Dr. Waldman, Henry Frankenstein's favorite teacher. Remember him from The Mummy and Dracula? He's the one who left the criminal brain lying around in his classroom for Fritz to steal. Before the film begins, Van Sloan breaks the fourth wall to talk to the audience about the subject matter, warning them about the story before they get too scared.
It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
In the Simpsons TV show, Marge pleads with the audience in the same way before the Treehouse of Horror episodes.
Tonight's show, which I totally wash my hands of, is really scary. So if you have sensitive children, maybe you should tuck them into bed early tonight instead of writing us angry letters tomorrow.
Let's begin by going ahead and assigning blame where it belongs. Dr. Frankenstein wants to make a new life from the body parts of dead men. That's bad, of course, but the real mistake was in hiring this guy as an assistant. Fritz, played by Dwight Frye, helps his mad scientist employer gather the body parts he needs to create life. The one thing that's missing is a brain. While stealing it, whoops, drops the good brain. He has no choice but to take the leftover one on the table, which just so happens to be a criminal brain. So you see, it's all Fritz's fault. Igor in Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein even made the same mistake. Let's talk about censorship now. Past versions of this film left out certain shots, such as the one where Dr. Frankenstein shouts,
Oh, in the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God. Oh.
Another place that was cut was the needle that was thrust into the monster's back. Portions of the scene where the monster throws the little girl in the lake were cut too. Now these scenes don't seem too controversial, but in the 1930s, this made the film far too frightening for audiences. Today, this film would probably get a PG rating at best. Audiences were scared more about the style and atmosphere of films than the gore and jump scares. Notice that the sets have such memorable visuals. In the cemetery, one of the graves has the Grim Reaper instead of a cross. Henry Frankenstein even flings dirt in his face while digging up a grave. Frankenstein's watchtower has all those vertical contraptions and electronic spark-producing machines, and the windmill with its rickety old wooden stairs and landings. The performances in Frankenstein really invest the audience in the story by sympathizing with the characters. We feel for Henry due to his driving force to discover. Then we feel for him when he regrets his decision and attempts to redeem himself. Henry's fiancée demands our sympathy by pursuing her husband to be, regardless of his dark practices of creating a monster. And the monster, of course, who is largely innocent for everything that happens to him. There's so much more I could say, but to summarize, all of these elements, actors, director, artists, and technicians collided during the early 1930s, despite the Great Depression, to give us the perfect monster film. Next time on the Monster Report, it's our last, but my personal favorite in the Universal lineup, the creature from the Black Lagoon. We'll see you then.